Alright, so the science chapter. So physics refers to physical force. Physiology refers to our body's response to physical force. Even though we're doing this for fun, there is a good bit of science involved in diving. I don't care that you get really fine-tuned on the details. I just want you to have an overall grasp of what happens to us as we dive. And we've already talked about some of this stuff, but so far as swimmers, the only kind of buoyancy you're really used to and really familiar with is positive buoyancy. Positive buoyancy is that things that are positively buoyant float on the surface. These are things like your boat. Now, we're used to swimming, we're used to wearing life preservers, we're used to seeing boats float. That's Archimedes' principle that says why boats can float. And basically, there's some science behind it, but an object displaces more water weight than it weighs by mass, and then it floats. If you throw a lead weight that's this big in the water, it's going to sink straight down because it doesn't push much of the water out. If that sort of kind of makes sense. But a big item like a beach ball, it forces more water away than it weighs, and so that it floats. Negatively buoyant objects sink when we first go into the pool, or the entire time in the pool you're going to be wearing weights, but I'm going to have you to deflate your BC. And then you're going to be forced down by the weights, and then you're going to be kneeling on the bottom of the swimming pool. And that's how we're going to do most of our skills, is negatively buoyant on the swimming pool. A little later on, like after you're getting good and after we're doing kind of getting past the skills, I'm going to teach you neutral buoyancy. Neutral buoyancy is more like a submarine where you're mid-water. Instead of crawling on the bottom like a bulldozer or floating on the top like a boat, you're mid-water at the exact depth you want to be at. And the way I'm going to teach this to you initially is I'm going to get you to lay face down on the bottom of the swimming pool, deflate your BC, stretch your legs out, point your toes, and take a deep breath. Probably nothing's going to happen. And then I'm going to have you add a little bit of air to your BC and take another deep breath. And keep doing that. And what I'm looking for is that without you pushing or kicking or anything, just taking in a deep breath, you're going to pivot up on your fin tips. When you exhale, you're going to sink back down on your fin tips. Just by breathing in and out, no pushing, no anything, you do that. We use our BCs for coarse buoyancy adjustment and our lungs for our fine-tuned buoyancy adjustment. When you take a deep breath, it's causing your body to displace more water weight than you weigh, and eventually you're going to get pivoting up and down just on your fin tips. And that's just the start of getting the hang of neutral buoyancy. Ideally, you're going to be able to maintain the depth that you want to be at. Now, this is a hard skill. You're not going to master it by the end of the pool. You're not necessarily going to master it by the end of the program. There is a special class for buoyancy, I forget, honestly, advanced buoyancy or something class. Truthfully, I'd rather you not take that class. It's kind of like a nitrox class. It's a very small class. I can charge you and certify you in buoyancy. I'd rather you just go diving with me. Meaning, don't pay me for a class. Just go diving. I'll help you with your buoyancy. Like, even past this class, just anytime you go diving with me, I'll help you with your buoyancy. You don't get certified for that particular skill, but it's a better way to learn. Instead of, here's, give me your money, let's do this. Let's just go diving together and we'll work on that together. Okay. Buoyancy control. Good buoyancy control is the sign of an experienced diver. It's going to help the diver. It's one of the most important skills to master, but not every diver even comes close to being aware of what it is. Y'all have not seen this chapter before, right? Okay, just making sure. So, right here in the classroom, air has weight to it. And it's, before I owned the Scuba store, I really didn't think of air. I thought of air having some theoretical weight, that a scientist in a lab can theoretically prove that air has weight. But now owning the store, there's a tangible weight to the air. So if I put two identical scuba tanks sitting here, same color, same size, same everything, the full scuba tank is going to have 6 pounds of actual air in it. That, like, put a full scuba tank on a bathroom scale, it weighs 6 pounds more than an empty scuba tank, and the only thing different is the amount of air that's in that scuba tank. A full scuba tank will sink to the bottom when you throw it in the swimming pool. An empty scuba tank will float in the pool, which is like really applied, you can see it sort of thing.
know that pressure is weight. For example, if you were to invite a hippopotamus to come and sit on you, your body would be subject to a pressure equal to the weight of one hippopotamus. At sea level, our bodies are subject to a pressure equal to the weight of the air above us. How much is this? If we were to take a column of air, 1 centimeter square, that extended from sea level all the way up to the upper reaches of the atmosphere, it would weigh 1 kilogram. A similar column of air, with a cross-section of 1 square inch, would weigh just under 15 pounds. What this means is that, at sea level, the surface of our bodies are subject to an atmospheric pressure equal to 1 kilogram per centimeter square, or a little under 15 pounds per square inch. We refer to this amount of pressure as either 1 bar or 1 atmosphere. You don't have to be much of a math whiz to figure out that when multiplied by the surface area of our bodies, this works out to several tons of pressure. That's one very serious hippopotamus. So why doesn't this immense amount of pressure cause us excruciating pain or crush our bodies like eggshells? The answer is that our bodies are comprised primarily of solids and liquids, which are relatively incompressible. These solids and liquids also transmit pressure evenly, so it means that our body tissues are pre-pressurized at sea level to a pressure of 1 bar or 1 atmosphere. This also means that a state of equilibrium exists between our bodies and the pressure surrounding them, what we refer to as ambient pressure. So long as this pressure remains in balance, we won't feel a thing. Our bodies also contain a number of air spaces, such as our lungs and sinuses. However, so long as we keep these air spaces filled with air at ambient pressure, they'll suffer no ill effects. In fact, this helps explain how scuba equipment works. By allowing us to breathe air at ambient pressure, regardless of depth, scuba equipment allows us to breathe as effortlessly underwater as we do at the surface. Once we venture underwater, our bodies are subject to the weight of not only the air above us, but the water as well. Water is approximately 800 times denser than air and weighs considerably more. In fact, a column of water, just 10 meters or 33 feet high, is equal in weight to a column of air with the same cross-section that extends all the way up to the upper reaches of the atmosphere. What this means is that by the time you venture just 10 meters or 33 feet below the surface, the ambient pressure will have doubled. By the time you reach 20 meters or 66 feet, that pressure will have tripled. And by the time you reach 30 meters or 99 feet, the pressure will be 4 times what it was at the surface. Again, so long as we can keep the pressure inside our body's air spaces equal to that of the water surrounding us, we'll suffer no ill effects as a result of this tremendous increase in pressure. In fact, just as our bodies don't tend to feel the pressure of the atmosphere above us at sea level, they won't feel the water pressure when it's 2, 3, or 4 times greater. As divers, we're less concerned with the quantity of the pressure surrounding us than we are with its effect on factors such as volume and density. Here's an example that will better illustrate the relationship between pressure, volume, and density. For this example, we'll use an inverted drinking glass that's filled with air from the surface. At sea level, the pressure inside the glass is the same as the air surrounding it. That's 1 bar or 1 atmosphere. The volume of air inside the glass, we'll say, is 1 liter. And finally, we'll give the air molecules inside the drinking glass a density factor of 1. Let's see what happens when we take the glass to a depth of 10 meters or 33 feet. At this depth, the ambient or surrounding pressure is 2 bar or 2 atmospheres, twice what it was at sea level. The air inside the glass has been compressed to half what it was at the surface, showing an inverse relationship between pressure and volume. What's important to understand is that although the volume has changed, the quantity of air molecules has not. They're simply packed twice as close together as they were before. Now let's see what happens when we go to a depth of 20 meters or 66 feet. At this depth, the ambient pressure is 3 times what it was at surface. The volume is now 1/3 of what it was to start, and the density of those air molecules is now 3 times what it was to begin with. At this point, you should have a pretty good idea of what will happen if we take the glass to the recommended sport diving depth limit of 30 meters or 99 feet. At this depth, the ambient pressure is 4 times what it was at the surface. The volume of the air inside the glass has been compressed to 1/4 of what it was at sea level, and, not surprisingly, the air molecules inside this tiny space are packed 4 times closer together than they were at the beginning. In your study materials, you'll find a chart that summarizes the information we've just discussed. You'll want to study this chart, not so much to commit it to memory, as to be able to recreate it by following the logic on which it's based. As divers, the relationship between pressure, volume, and density impacts us in a number of ways, which we'll discuss in the sections ahead. One very immediate effect of the increased density of the air we breathe underwater is how it affects air consumption. Case in point, at a depth of 10 meters or 33 feet, the air we breathe from our scuba cylinders is twice as dense as it would be on the surface. This means that at this depth, we'll consume air twice as fast. At a depth of 20 meters or 66 feet, we'll consume air 3 times as fast. And at 30 meters or 99 feet, we'll consume it 4 times as fast as we would at the surface. Let's look at this another way. How long a cylinder lasts underwater depends on a variety of factors, such as cylinder size and respiratory rate. Nevertheless, all other factors being equal, a scuba cylinder that would normally last us 1 hour at the surface will last just 30 minutes at a depth of 10 meters or 33 feet. This same cylinder will last just 20 minutes at a depth of 20 meters or 66 feet, and just 15 minutes at a depth of 30 meters or 99 feet. You already know that in shallow water, you enjoy more sunlight and brighter, more natural colors. Now you see that there's another very practical benefit to staying shallow whenever possible. Your air lasts longer. In the sections ahead, you'll learn about 2 additional limitations associated with deeper diving. For now, it's enough to know that it's to your benefit to stay shallow whenever possible.
So now let's talk about this in different terms just for a minute. So think of a kickball, kind of flexible, bendable kickball or that kind of thing, okay? If we throw it into the water, what's going to happen to it? It's going to float, right. Now if we put a bag or a mesh or something that makes it easy to handle and we start pulling it down under the water, what's going to happen?
Strength.
Right, well sort of, but it's going to compress. So when we get that kickball to 33 feet of seawater, it's going to be exactly half its original size because the water pressure has doubled at 33 feet. Now, if I release the kickball at 33 feet, what's going to happen? It's going to pop up. So it's going to, say that in different words. It's going to shoot to the top. Okay. Well, the pop was the word I was questioning. What do you mean by pop? So, okay. So this is what happens when we swim, when we take a deep breath and swim to the deep end of the swimming pool. The airspace behind our ears compresses, our lungs compress, we are compressing any of the air spaces in our body. However deep we go, we compress those air spaces. But when we go back up, they re-expand back to normal size. There's no gain or anything with those air spaces. This is why you can hold your breath and do all this. Now, let's throw that kickball in again, take it down to 33 feet again. Now we have an underwater bicycle pump, and we blow that kickball up to full at 33 feet of seawater, and then we release it. What happens?
Nothing first.
It's going to go up when we release it, and it's either going to double in size or it's going to rupture on the way up. This is where this whole breathe continuously and never hold your breath part comes in. So what you're doing when you're breathing in and out and keeping breathing is you're keeping your airspace open, so any excess bubbles can vent off as bubbles and they don't cause any problems. If you were to hold your breath, that would be that kickball being full at the bottom and going up. As long as you keep breathing, it's not an issue. Does that kind of make sense? Okay. So the deeper you go, the more air you breathe. A lot of new or non-divers will come in and say, how long will an air tank last? Well, there's a lot of variables worked into that. There's your breathing rate, how deep you are, all that kind of stuff. And
can you breathe as deep as you want?
Ask that one more time. You can breathe as deep as you want. Yeah, breathe. But why do you ask that? Or let me.
Because that's what I panicked with when we went. Like
why?
I couldn't get a deep enough breath. I don't know.
That might be anxiety. I'm not sure what that was. But you should be able to breathe, and y'all have good regulators, y'all bought good regs, so they're going to breathe as well as you're breathing on the surface, or maybe even slightly easier breathing than it is right now, because it's kind of power breathing. So, but you can always breathe as deep as you want. Some of the lower end regs are more like breathing through a straw, that you have to suck really hard to get the air to come out, where yours are going to breathe very easy. So for every dive, you want to consider how much air your tank holds. It's your job to track your air in your tank. Now, initially as my students, I'm going to be saying a lot, hey, how much, are you okay? How much air do you have? Because I'm doing that to try to kind of train you of how often I want you to look at your air. But I can't run out of air for you. So it's your job to keep up with the amount of air in your tank. Does that kind of make sense?
Yes.
And keep up with it really well. Remember, and if you're used to doing shallow dives, and you start thinking, well, my tank's going to last this many minutes because I've done 50 dives and I've been fine at 33 feet. Then if you go down to 60 feet, you're doubling the amount of air you're using again. So you just need to be aware of that. So really monitor your tank. So we've talked about this a bit. Has anybody had a chance to look at that, a diver's guide to the ear form yet? Okay. It goes into detail about this. But basically behind your eardrum is another airspace. There's another balloon or a kickball back there. And our bodies are designed to be, or are used to staying at the size that they're used to being at. So as you go down deeper, the kickball behind your eardrum gets compressed. What we need to do to keep that from causing pain or discomfort is to equalize that airspace. We equalize that airspace. There's a bunch of different ways in that flyer. But the way I usually do it is I pinch my nose and blow into my nose, and that forces air through the eustachian tubes and reinflates my eardrums. There's other ways as well, but that's what I usually do.
Does air go out when it's on? When you go up?
Yes, it does. So usually, unless you go with a colder congestion or broke some other rule, then it might not work its way out. But we'll talk about that here in just a bit. That's a really good question. So you have to equalize all air spaces. So breathing continuously equalizes your lungs. Never diving with a colder congestion. If you dive with a colder congestion, there's a chance that even though you breathe continuously, a portion of your lungs are blocked off, or something's blocked. Even though you're not holding your breath, your body's not letting that one spot of your body ventilate, and that could cause problems. Now, so I'm not a doctor, I don't give medical advice, but I'm going to tell you what I do. I have pretty bad allergies. I'm like I can't breathe right now all that well. I'm kind of stuffy right now. I take Allegra D every day just in general, has nothing to do with diving. Sometimes if I'm still feeling stuffy before a dive, I'm not recommending this to you, I'm just telling you what I do. Sometimes before dives I'll use Afrin or Afrin or Sudafed or something like that before a dive so that I can get down. But that's just me and my allergies. Like I said, I'm stuffy right now, I can't breathe well now, and I wouldn't want to be in Florida and say, no, my allergies are bothering me today, let's try again tomorrow. So I want to take y'all down. Exhaling periodically into your mask. I know a couple of times y'all have called masks goggles, and there is a real difference between goggles and a mask. And the difference is that a mask includes your nose in it so that you can equalize that airspace. So as you go down, because there's air in it, you'll get a mask squeeze, and you have to reinflate that airspace. So if you go down very deep with swim goggles, you'll wind up with a black eye, or even worse than a black eye, because you can't blow air back into it. So it's like a great big hickey over each eye, because you can't blow air into it.
Yeah, I
So,
experienced that in the quarry. We jumped off of it,
Mhm.
and we went down, I held my nose,
right?
and then my finger sucked into it, and it bruised my nose.
Yeah, that happens, yeah. My first ever deep dive, I was actually wearing one of those dry suits on the floor, the big rubber ones, and when I came up, and the suit was pinching me a bit, but I was a little bit afraid of the dry suit, so I wasn't putting much air into it, because I didn't want to get out of control with it, and so I was kind of toughing it out, but everywhere there was a wrinkle in that dry suit, it pinched really bad, and it looked like I'd been beaten up, like there were bruised stripes all up and down me. Anywhere there was a wrinkle was a bruise in that suit.
So when you exhale into your mask, will it let water in?
No. But now, so that is a good question, and there's some other stuff I want to hit on that. So usually you're going to breathe in through your mouth, out through your mouth. That's the cycle of breathing that I want you to do. But every little bit as you descend, just a little half or a quarter breath into your mask is what I'm looking for. You don't need much air, just a little bit. But you could potentially, so every time you exhale through your nose, it has to break the seal of your mask a little bit to let that air out. Some divers will get into the habit of in through their mouth, out through their nose, and so every breath goes out through the nose. That will cause mask fogging and potentially leaking if you do it that much. I mean, if you do it a little bit, it might let a barely imperceptible amount of water into your mask, but not enough to really even notice. But if you do it every breath, eventually that barely perceptible is become a problem.
See, I've only ever done breathe through your mouth, out through your nose, like when I've been in the water, like either scuba diving or snorkeling or
Right.
anything. I breathe in through my mouth and out through my nose.
Right, and that's not the right way to do it, because that will cause mask leaking, it'll cause mask fogging, because every time you breathe out through your nose, your mask has to break
I guess I
seal.
didn't think that you could breathe out through your mouth because you're breathing in.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does, but like
I
right
didn't
now,
realize you could breathe out of your. I thought you had to breathe out of your nose.
in through your mouth, out through your mouth, almost every breath. So, you need to, something that's hard to teach. Now, some of the skills that I'm going to teach you is to put some water into your mask. We're going to do a partial flood and clear, a full flood and clear, and then even a mask removal underwater. The way you get that water out of the mask is you're going to breathe in through your mouth, look up, push right here, and exhale out of your nose. And it'll force most or all the water out. Breathe in through your mouth again, blow out your nose, and all the water should be gone. Something that's hard to teach and that sometimes we've had issues with is, I just said, so to get the water out, in through your mouth, out through your nose, people will blow out through their mouth and think they're blowing out of their nose, but if you blow out of your mouth, it doesn't force that water out because there's no air going up. And it's hard to say, no, blow out here, not here. There's no way
It's
to.
like teaching a kid to blow their nose.
It is, it's hard.
Right.
So, and I can't, like, that's hard to put into words. So,
I got it.
and underwater. So, I had a friend that I took diving a couple of years ago, and we kind of got in an argument. And she said, no, I am blowing out through my nose. No, you're not. Yes, I am. I'm positive of it. And I had to show her the video of where the bubbles were coming from before she believed me that she wasn't blowing out right. So, anyway. Now, getting regular professional dental care. What do you think this could potentially be talking about?
Well,
Any
if you have an
guesses?
infection, you have air, it's like a
Sort of. But I asked a dentist about this because I was concerned. Like, I didn't know
So you
what.
can get a good mouth, such like the thing that's in your mouth, right? Whatever.
No, not exactly. So what this dentist told me, because I honestly had no idea what this was talking about. Like, now do I need to be telling my customers, now if you're going to become a diver, go to your dentist and get a checkup to make sure everything's good? And what he was saying, and think it through with me just for a minute, but if you have a filling, like if you've got a cavity and they put a filling in, if that filling is not done properly, there could be just a little bit of air under your filling, and that air bubble under your filling could get squeezed. But what this dentist customer of mine said is the only time that really is gonna be an issue is one is if you go somewhere not the US to get dental work done, or if you have a filling, it comes out and you go to Walgreens and buy an emergency filling repair kit or whatever it's called, and then you don't pack it fully and you leave a little bit of air, that could cause some problems as you go down.
Is it gonna like hurt or just?
It would hurt, yeah, but just get your regular dental work done and it shouldn't be a problem. Don't go to the flea market or, other countries to get dental work and you should be okay. Now you mentioned this earlier here, but if you suffer a reverse block, so normally, like during a descent, we pinch our nose, blow into our nose, it reinflates our eardrum. We can't do that backwards. I can't pinch and inhale through my nose and suck the air back out of my ears. It just has to work its way out naturally. Normally it just does come out naturally, but if you're ascending and you feel pain as you're going up, you do have a reverse block. So with that, you would go down just a little bit, kind of yawn, grit your teeth, wiggle your jaws, things like this, and come up slowly. So now let's go back and forth just a bit, but when you're descending is the only time you have to equalize. If you can't pop your ears going down, you don't need to necessarily surface, come up a few feet and try it again. If you still can't, come up a few more feet and try it again, and eventually you should be able to equalize. Does that kind of make sense? On ascent, when you're trying to go up and you can't, if it hurts going up, go down a little bit more, wiggle your jaws, swallow, this kind of things, and then just go up really slowly, and you should be okay. I don't want you forcing your ears going down. I have other dive stores and other customers from other dive stores have told me that they've ruptured eardrums in the past. And what they did is they couldn't equalize, they went too far before they tried, and then they just pinched and blew really, really, really hard, and they ruptured an eardrum. You shouldn't be forcing anything in this. That's gonna hurt you. Just, if you can't equalize, go up a few feet, try again, go up a few feet, try again. Don't just blow really hard because you will.
How often do you do it as you go down?
That's different for each diver. One of my instructors, he tells me every breath he equalizes. I do it as soon as my ears get wet, and then every foot or two during descent. Does that kind of make sense?
So when you come up, you don't equalize?
When you come up, you just go slowly, and it kind of does it automatically for you. There's no conscious anything there. Okay? That just happens. So right here in the classroom, we're breathing air. A lot of people think divers are breathing oxygen, and those are oxygen tanks sitting around. And that's not exactly true. Actually there's a lot of oxygen tanks in the store right now, but they don't really even understand what people breathe. So right here in the classroom, we're breathing air. Air is made up of roughly 21% oxygen and 79% nitrogen. That's the final mix of gas that we're breathing in the room right now. Same thing, you as entry-level divers will be breathing in your scuba tanks. When you go to the pool, we're going to put air in your scuba tanks. When we go to Florida, we'll talk about it, but since you're in the nitrox class, we should probably put nitrox in those tanks. Nitrox is a higher percentage of oxygen. So for Florida, we'll probably do 32% oxygen, 32% nitrox. That replaces that bad nitrogen. The nitrogen is the gas that causes most of the problems. It's what causes nitrogen narcosis. It's what causes decompression sickness and all this other kind of stuff. Our bodies need oxygen to survive. We breathe in roughly 21% oxygen. We breathe out 79%. We breathe in 21% oxygen. We breathe out about 18% oxygen. We consume a portion of the oxygen in every breath. We burn some of that oxygen up. We breathe in 79% nitrogen. We breathe out 79% nitrogen. We don't need that nitrogen. It's kind of just filler or fluff or buffer for the oxygen. But we also can't, I could put pure oxygen in your tanks, but you can't have pure oxygen on dives either. Oxygen becomes toxic depending on the depth you are. And your nitrox program will talk about this just a bit, but you can consider oxygen a drug. The deeper and deeper you go with any gas, it concentrates that drug. So at 20 feet, pure oxygen becomes toxic. You're overdosing on oxygen, and it'll cause seizures and things like that. So that's why there's a nitrox class, to kind of teach you the limits of when and what you can do with oxygen. So scuba diving's single most important rule is to breathe continuously and never hold your breath. We've talked about this with the kickball. You don't want to rupture the kickball. Even when your regulator is not in your mouth. Some of the skills we're going to do involve taking your regulator out of your mouth. Whenever your reg's not in your mouth, I still want to see a steady stream of bubbles. I want a stream of bubbles coming out. Now that does mean when you take your reg out, don't blow all your air out right away, because then you don't have a steady stream of bubbles anymore. But I always want to see an open airway, and that you can show me that by a steady stream of bubbles. Does that make sense?
How long do you have to do that for?
Not very long. Good. Don't stress. Not very long. Breath holding on a scent puts you at risk of a lung overexpansion injury. This is inflating that kickball fully at depth, keeping the air in, and then bringing it up. The kickball is going to double in size, or it's going to rupture. Neither of those would be good for you if that were your lungs. I have been told that your lungs can only tolerate about 2 psi of pressure or overpressure. Now, and you've got to remember, from the surface to 33 feet is an additional 15 psi of pressure. So really, there's enough pressure change to hurt your lungs 7 times, sort of, kind of. But just breathe continuously. Out of all the years of diving I've been diving, I've never had any injury or never had a customer have any injury related to that. So this is Bonaire, and you may have already seen this video, but this is just Bonaire. This is a diver blowing bubbles. But I just want you to notice how the bubble ring gets bigger, the bubbles get bigger as we go up. And I want to back up just for a minute. In the Sea Hunt episode that you watched last night, one of the things he said was ascend no faster than your slowest bubble or something. When I got into diving, that was the rule, and now that's not the rule anymore. That's too loose. The bubble, how fast your bubbles go up, have nothing to do with how fast you go up. You follow your computers now.
Is he breathing out of his regulator to get the rings?
No, his regulator's out of his mouth.
Just like smoke rings.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how to do a smoke ring, but probably.
Will they show us how to do it?
Tell you how to do it.
My grandpa could do it with smoke.
Really? That's kinda cool.
It was the coolest thing ever.
See how the ring gets bigger as it goes up? It should go almost all the way to the surface. So the way I blow bubble rings, and it's a little hard, anytime you turn upside down on scuba gear, it kind of throws everything off just a bit. It makes your regs breathe wet and a little bit different and things. But the way I blow a bubble ring is I kind of put and it's hard to explain, but I put my tongue on the inside of my teeth, and I kind of try to puff out all of my lips here full of air. It's kind of like that, and then I do and that's kind of how I try to blow a bubble ring, and it usually works pretty well. But try to lay flat and keep your head kind of level and all that kind of stuff when you do it. If we have some downtime, and remind me if you want to play blowing bubble rings, I'll give you a little bit of time to play with it. So the next video is at Jenny Springs. It's where we're going the first day of diving. And if you're doing really well, I may take you into the cavern just for like a little sightseeing tour. This is the roof of the cavern here. First, see how dark it is, but the other is bubbles get trapped in the roof of this cavern, and it's really neat looking. And it's neater in person than it is on video, but the bubbles get trapped in the ceiling, and you can kind of poke at them and play with the air bubbles caught in the ceiling.
Do GoPros take still shots?
Mm-hmm.
And if we have one, there's an extra piece that we have to have that mounts it on our mask, or does you just wear it on your head?
Don't wear it on your head. There's a strap that you can buy. It's like a head mount strap, but that doesn't work very well. So not right now, but later. There's a whole bunch of different ways to do it. Let's talk about it later. Okay? Because it's a little more. We put this piece to this piece, and we figure out the best way for you as opposed to the standard right way. But the head strap is a kind of a way to lose your GoPro, basically. So this is Bon Air again. This is a diver that is just kind of playing in the bubbles going up, showing how clear Bon Air is, and I just like bubbles. It's kind of neat to see them. Sometimes if there's nothing going on and wherever I'm at is boring and the water's clear, sometimes I'll just watch the bubbles go up just because it's kind of random and cool. This is so clear you can see the clouds in the sky.
I know.
How deep were you?
I was probably 45, 50 feet deep or something, and she was probably 25 feet deep.
That looked like 3 feet.
No, it looks so much closer.
Florida, the first day where we go, you can see the trees and the leaves on the trees and things. So before I forget, and I'll hopefully remember as we get to it, but Florida, the first day in Florida, if you see a turtle, he is not a friendly turtle. He's not your friend. Leave him alone and don't pet him or touch him or get anywhere near him. He'll be an alligator snapping turtle, day 1. Day 2, if you see a turtle, his name is Virgil, and he's kind of friendly, and you can pet him and play with him, and he'll come down and check you out. Okay, but I still wouldn't let him like bite me. Like if he looks like he's opening his mouth near my hand, I'll pull my fingers back. But he probably won't bite. But I wouldn't like let my finger or anything like that. So anyway. So one of the reasons dive computers are so important, and owning your dive computer is so important, that it's telling you what you need to do. If you stay, it's going to tell you how long you can stay down, how fast you can come up, and all the other stuff that you need to know for your dive. It's vitally important for you to understand what it's telling you when it tells you something, not you need to know your dive computer. Let's see. You can reduce the risk of decompression sickness by making safety stops. What is safety stop? So let's talk just for a minute about what decompression stops are. Let's just assume, actually, let me go get a bottle of water. I'll be right back.
So mom's not going to Florida.
Mm.
Let's just imagine for a minute that this is a bottle of Coca-Cola. The bottle of Coca-Cola is very similar to what happens to divers as they scuba dive, okay? So, well, before we get this shake it up, you have the way they put the bubbles in a bottle of Coke, the bubbles in a bottle of Coke are carbon dioxide or CO2. In very simple terms, they hook a hose of pressurized CO2 over it. They pressurize that CO2, and that pressure causes the CO2 to dissolve into the liquid. And then they put the cap on, the cap holds the pressure in, so now you don't see any bubbles. You can shake a Coke with a cap on up, you might see a couple bubbles, but they go away right away. But if you take that cap off on a bottle that's been shaken, the bubbles are going to immediately come out where you can see them and probably run over, like over the bottle. Y'all all done this, seen this, right? Now, same thing happens with a diver, except it's nitrogen bubbles. The pressure of the depth of the water causes the nitrogen in the air that we're breathing to be dissolved into our blood and our tissues and everything else. As long as we stay down, it's not an issue. It's the taking the cap off, the coming up, reducing the pressure. That's what causes the bubbles to come out of solution and then we have bubbles flowing through our bloodstream. Those bubbles flowing through can get lodged in nerves and other things, and those bubbles lodging, that's called decompression sickness or decompression illness. So the biggest thing our computers do is tell us how long we can stay down, and why it matters is we don't want to get too many bubbles dissolved into our tissue that we can't come up. And then if you stay too long or come up too quickly, your dive computer is going to say, hey, you need to stop. A safety stop is a suggested stop at 15 feet. And what that safety stop is for is the 15 feet of depth keeps the bubbles kind of small, and it's giving your body a chance to cycle all your blood through your lungs. Your lungs are your bubble filter. They catch any bubbles in your bloodstream, and then you exhale them out. If you came all the way up and skipped the safety stop, there's a chance the bubbles get too big, and before they get to your lungs, they get lodged in places, and then that's decompression sickness. Does that kind of make sense? All right.
So it's every 15 feet?
No, the 15 feet. That's it. the top 15 feet.
Oh, just
Yeah.
just one time?
Yeah, one time.
Okay.
At the end of,
Okay.
at
Like
the,
for how long?
at the end of every dive, you're gonna stop for 10 to 20 feet for 3 to 5 minutes.
Gotcha.
Okay.
So, for me, it's really 10 to 20. I always make it 15 because that's just a good right middle ground, and 15 is just a good number. So, usually the boats have 15-foot lines, and there's others, 15 feet is just a good number. And I usually do 3 minutes unless it's a particularly long dive or there's something kind of extra. So you want to make a safety spot stop. You want to avoid sawtooth profiles. A sawtooth profile is you don't want to go down to 60 feet and up to 15 and down to 80 and up to 4 and a lot of ups and downs. Generally, you want the deepest part of your dive to be at the beginning of the dive, and then you gradually work your way up. You don't fly or drive to altitude for 24 hours after diving. Anytime we go anywhere, the last 24 hours is kind of the sightseeing day where we don't dive. We pack our gear, we do a bunch of other stuff, and go sightseeing basically. That lets you get all the nitrogen out of your system. Signs and symptoms of decompression sickness may include pain in the joints, rash, difficulty breathing, dry cough, dizziness, numbness, tingling, paralysis, temporary blindness, and unconsciousness. All bad stuff. Above the level of this class, but oxygen, pure oxygen, is a good first aid for almost all diving injuries. Like if you suspect anything's going on, offer the person pure oxygen. The green box up here that says Dan, that's an oxygen kit that a lot of boats will have. It looks just like that on it. It's got an oxygen bottle and a mask and a regulator and all that. 100% pure oxygen is important, not 40% or some other mixture. I have in the back of the van, I have a backpack it's green and probably has a red cross on it, but it's a green backpack as well.
Can you breathe pure oxygen and like jump back into this?
Yes, wait, ask me that one more time. Can you breathe pure oxygen and jump right back into the water?
No, like, then jump back into the 20% or whatever the air is.
Like take it back off and just start breathing normally.
Yeah, anytime. Yeah, that's no problem.
How long do you do the pure oxygen?
If you think you have decompression sickness, do it till you run out of pure oxygen. So, or a while. I mean, there's no exact number. Just do it. If you start feeling better after a while, it probably is decompression sickness or something else. Now, let's talk about decompression sickness right now. So, right now, our body is saturated with nitrogen. At the altitude that we're at, our body has all the nitrogen it can possibly hold. If we drive up to the mountains right now, we're going to off-gas some nitrogen because the pressure is less in the mountains. If you've all seen, fighter pilots and astronauts and all that, and they're breathing pure oxygen, right? Before they ever get in their fighter plane, before they ever get in the space shuttle, they're breathing pure oxygen. The reason why is that a fighter pilot or an astronaut could get decompression sickness just by going up. If an astronaut is breathing air, he gets in a spaceship and goes straight up into space, he has reduced his altitude and the pressure is reduced, and the nitrogen that's already in his system from breathing air will come out really quickly, and he'll get decompression sickness, and he had nothing to do with the water. So that's why astronauts and fighter pilots are breathing pure oxygen. Does that kind of make sense? So another thing to concern yourself with is nitrogen narcosis. The point or the purpose of your 60-foot limit at the end of this class is to hopefully keep you back from nitrogen narcosis. This is what Jacques Cousteau called rapture of the deep, or the Martini effect. The deeper and deeper you go, the nitrogen in the breathing gas is going to become narcotic, or like a narcotic effect, or it's going to kind of make you feel a little drunk. You might have euphoria, anxiety, some other symptoms, but you might not know that you're having it, but you're not. But it's kind of like drinking. Have I had too much to drink? Well, I'm too drunk to tell. You know what? I'm too drunk to tell. So your judgment is not as good. And that's where this 60-foot rule comes in, is that we're trying to keep you from ever experiencing this until you're experienced enough to handle it, let's say. But by using nitrox, you're eliminating some of that nitrogen or reducing some of that nitrogen, so hopefully it won't affect you quite as much. For really deep dive, and it's the nitrogen is the bad gas that becomes narcotic. For really, really deep dives, well, depending on what really, really deep you call really, really deep, sometimes divers will replace more nitrogen with helium, because because you can't go over 21% oxygen, or you can't go over your dosage of oxygen. So sometimes drivers will use helium. The downside of that is that helium is really expensive. There's some other
It makes you
downsides
talk
to it.
funny too.
It makes you talk funny too. It's hard not to laugh when you hear yourself talking funny as well. So everything involving safety at Sink or Swim Scuba, we have a lot of redundancy built into it. So every year, a couple of dive shops in the area, well, I've heard of a dive shop in the area and a dive shop near our coast that has had some bad air issues, let's say. I have multiple levels of safety to eliminate any possibility of my compressor pumping bad air. So one of the ways a compressor can pump bad air is it's near car exhaust. It gets some carbon monoxide or something like that. So just to give you an example, and this carries over into other things with safety too, but my compressor, you've got to have a car pumping exhaust and maybe sucking it in. That would be one way to get carbon monoxide into the compressor. My compressor air intake is at the rear of the building. Like you'd have to drive through the woods and cut trees down and knock a chain link fence down to get near the air intake of my compressor. Carbon monoxide is a heavy gas. It sinks. The air intake of my compressor is on the roof line of my building. Like it's under the cover, but it's like as high as I can be without getting rained on, kind of thing. I also have a filtration system that if somehow magically carbon monoxide gets past those two things, this filtration system takes out the carbon monoxide. And let's see, and then I send my air off to a lab as well to get it checked pretty regularly. So I have a lot of stuff going on there. And I breathe my air more often than you, so we would notice some issues. But there's some other dive shops in the area that had some bad air issues, and there's some at the coast. I actually had a customer, it was last year, that he got his air filled from me. His buddies all got their air filled from the boat at the beach, and they all wound up having pretty serious headaches and having to skip some dives. And he was the only one that didn't have the issue, and that's why he said your air is good. There's one. All right, we've been going at this for a bit. Let's take about a 10-minute break, guys.